Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another ASA Oplo Academy webinar. Today's webinar is Hanging the Door, What Are the Options? My name is Russell Corriveau, and I will be your lead instructor today. This session will take about 45 minutes. During this session, your lines will be muted. However, you can submit questions as we go along, and we will save time at the end of the presentation for your questions. Also, within 24 hours, you will receive an email from us as proof of attending this webinar that can be submitted to your employer, or one of the industry association partners such as DHI or ALOA for CEUs. Also, within 24 hours, this webinar will be available to be reviewed because it will be put up on the web on the ASA Oplo Academy website, so you can review it if you need to. So let's get started. Hanging the doors, what are our options? DHI, which is the Door and Hardware Institute, recommends a standard sequence of listing door hardware on a sequence sheet. This is called a hardware schedule. So on a typical hardware schedule, the proper order of installing the products is you want to hang the door first. Next, you want to secure the door. You want to control the door. And you want to protect the door. And when you look at a hardware schedule, this is the way it's going to be listed out. Here we have a hardware schedule for a single office door. And as you see on the list here, the first thing that they're calling out is 3 hinges. They're calling out TA4 hinges, which are anti-friction bearing hinges from McKinney. So they're calling out, so that's how they're going to be hanging the door. The second thing they want to do is they want to secure the door, which means they want to be able to lock the door. And in this example here, they're going to be locking the door with an exit device. Next, they want to control the door's movement. And how do you control the door's movement? One of the best ways is with a surface closer. And here they're going to be using a surface closer to control the door's movement. Next, we want to protect the door. And this can encompass a lot of different things. Everything from the threshold to brush sweeps to weather stripping, all of that's included in protecting the opening. Even things such as door hooks and hat hooks on the back of doors are all part of protecting the opening. So there are many considerations that need to be made when you're considering hanging a door. Some of the basic questions are, where is the door located? How heavy is the door? And how frequently is the door going to be used? Is it the back door of a building, or is it the front main entrance? So there are a lot of questions. One of the most basic ways of securing an opening is with commercial hinges, such as those manufactured by McKinney. They consist of 2 leaves with a pivot in between the 2. One leaf is attached to the door, the other leaf is attached to the frame. This is referred to as a commercial hinge or a butt hinge. And normally you're using 3 of them on a standard 7 or 8 foot door. There are charts on that. We'll get into that later. So what I'm showing you here, this is a standard flush door and frame. And here we're showing you a full mortise hinge. And a full mortise hinge means that's going to be mortise into the edge of the door and into the edge of the frame, as we're showing you here. This is the most common way of installing wood doors and hollow metal doors. And this is usually done with metal frames. And this allows you to hold a nice clearance of 1/8 of an inch all the ways around the door. Okay, so this is a full mortised hinge. The next question you have is, do you need standard duty or heavy duty? And should it be 5 knuckle or should it be 3 knuckle hinges? And what should the material be? Should it be stainless steel? Should it be just steel, brass, or possibly bronze? We're going to take a look at these questions and other questions. So there are many sizes, but how does one know what size hinge they should be using? There are charts in catalogs that tell you what size hinges you should be using for different openings. But what we're talking about here is just the terminology for the hinge itself in terms of width and height. So there's basically 2 different dimensions, and it's always listed by the height first, followed by the width, and the width is with the hinge laid out flat. That's for the 2 dimensions. So when they're talking about 4.5 by 4.5, it's 4.5 inches tall. And when you lay it out flat, it's 4.5 inches across. Okay. And lastly, what we're showing you here is the gauge of the material. And that's very, very important. And we're going to take a closer look at that now. As I mentioned, charts are included in manufacturers of hinges. And in this example here, they're talking about the number of hinges that you should be using and the size of the hinges. So here we're referring to a 1 3/4 inch thick door. And for doors up to 36 inches, they're recommending 4.5 inch tall hinges with a gauge of 1/34. Okay. Keep in mind, the hinge size is going to be a direct correlation to the door that it's going to be installed in. Okay. What I'm showing you here is that there's standard hinges and there's heavy-duty hinges. Okay. The charts point out that we're both looking at the red box is showing 4.5 inches by 4.5 hinges. The standard duty hinge is 134 thousandths thick, while the heavy duty hinge is 180 thousandths thick. This thickness needs to be compensated for. This variation of thickness is handled differently based on different manufacturers. The images to the left show a shim plate in position that would be used with a standard weight hinge. If a heavyweight hinge was going to be used with this frame here, this shim plate would be removed. Some manufacturers use a small little wire here that they leave the wire in if it's for a standard hinge, and if it's for a heavy-duty hinge, they would remove it. Some of them create small little embosses in this area here. And standard hinges, you leave the embosses there, and for heavy-duty hinges, you would grind those embosses off so this hinge would rest flush. In general, there are two types of hinges. There's ball bearing and oil impregnated bearing hinges, and there's plain type of bearings. And basically plain type of bearings contain two hard surfaces that the surface is right against, but there are no bearings other than the two hard surfaces. Non-bearing hinges contain knuckles that are machined like bearing surfaces that move against each other. These are not recommended for high frequency openings or doors. These hinges are not approved on fire-rated doors either. So they're used on closet doors, lower frequency doors, where you're not going to get a lot of abuse on it. The other two types of hinges are oil impregnated bearing hinges, and oil impregnated bearing hinges have bronze bearings that are impregnated with oil that create a nice bearing system. The other type is called a ball bearing system that uses ball bearings as the bearing surfaces. Both types can be used on fire-rated openings. The oil-impregnated bearings contain a one-piece bronze self-lubricating bearing that ensures greater wear resistance. And due to the one-piece design, it's not affected as much by dirt, dust, and moisture, or being clogged, which leads to hinge fatigue. For McKinney, the oil-impregnated hinges are specified as TA. And there's a close-up look at it, and here's even a closer look at it. And as you can see here, you're not going to get a collection of dirt and dust in between the bearing surfaces. Ball bearing hinges contain concealed ball bearings which provide long life and a consistent performance with the hinge. Ball bearing hinges from McKinney are available with all 5-knuckle hinges and are standard on all hinges over 6 inches tall. And if you want ball bearing type hinges, it's specified as TB. And here's a closer look at the ball bearings. And as you can see in here, the ball bearings, it is possibility that over time, dirt can get in here. That's why we normally recommend the anti-friction bearing, but both of them are perfectly acceptable on fire-rated doors. Standard 3-knuckle and 5-knuckle hinges can be supplied with 2 bearings. What we're showing you here is a 5-knuckle hinge with 2 bearings, and in the picture there is showing you a 5-knuckle hinge with 2 bearings. And next we're going to show you the operation of it. So this is where a standard hinge would be used. So this one here, they're using the 5-knuckle hinge with 2 bearings in it. More heavy duty applications where a door is going to get a lot more abuse, that's where you want to use a four bearing hinge. These four bearing hinges will have 5 knuckles, of course, and they are available with both ball bearing type and anti-friction type. These can support a great deal more weight. And obviously you can't get these four bearing hinges with a 3 knuckle hinge, of course. And what I'm showing you here is that these heavy duty hinges are not just available as standard hinges. You can also get them as a swing clear hinge like I'm showing you here, or even as a wide throw hinge. They are all available as heavy duty hinges. And a perfect application for a heavy duty hinge like this would be a fire door like you see here in this picture here. These are 5 knuckle 4 bearing hinges, and this is a fire rated opening. And this door is expected to take a lot of abuse because it is a stairwell door, so it's going to be handled quite roughly. And that's why they're using these heavy duty hinges on this. The next thing you need to consider is the finish, and also, does the hinge need to be electrified? So what should the base metal for the hinge be? The next option to be considered is what the base metal should be. Is the door going to be used for interior applications or an exterior applications? Like, is it an exterior applications where you're going to have a lot of corrosion, where it's right by the water or the ocean, or in a pool area, if it's an internal application, if it's in a pool area? In these areas, you have a lot more possibility of corrosion. So oftentimes with these, if it's a non-fire rated door, we would recommend brass hinges or stainless steel hinges. Okay, both of them are 2 very good options for this. For exterior doors and most corrosive environments, stainless steel hinges or non-ferrous hinges are the best choices, which are either brass or bronze. These are recommended because they will not rust. And for those of you who aren't aware, brass is copper and zinc, bronze is going to be copper and tin, and stainless steel is a steel alloy that contains more than 10.5% chrome. So keep in mind that brass and bronze hinges cannot be used on fire-rated openings because of their low melting temperatures. Okay, stainless steel is the best choice for fire-rated doors in areas where you have high corrosion and where you benefit from the additional strength of stainless steel. The steel hinges are perfectly valid on fire-rated doors. Both steel and stainless steel hinges can be used on fire-rated openings. Keep in mind, most fire-rated doors are located on the interior parts of buildings. Therefore, corrosion normally is not a big concern, making steel a great option. And considering the lower price point, and don't forget, you can also have these hinges finished to whatever finish you'd like, so you can deal with a lower price point and still have a match everything else in the building. When you talk about the finishes, it's important that you recognize certain things about the finishes. What I'm showing you here are US finishes. As we're showing you here, a US 3 finish has a base metal of brass. A US 4 has a base metal of brass also. US 26 and US 26D can be either brass or bronze. But look at here. Here we have US 3, US 4, and here the base metal is steel. So keep in mind, these US designations are not the best designations to use when specifying hinges. You really want to be designating using ANSI BHMA designations such as 605 or 651. So if you want a steel hinge that has a chrome look on it that can be used on a fire-rated door, that would be a 651 or a 652. It would never be a 26 or a 26D because they can't handle the high temperatures of a fire-rated opening are required to handle. All fire-rated doors must be either steel or stainless steel due to the high temperatures. And the hinges must be either ball bearing or oil impregnated bearing type hinges. Have you ever seen a fire test? If you've never seen a fire test, what I'm going to show you next is a quick 20-second fire test. The way a fire test works is basically they mount the door into a brick wall and they put the entire brick wall into a furnace. And for a 3-hour fire rated, it sits in the furnace for 3 hours at over 2,000 degrees. Keep in mind, brass and bronze melt at 2,000 degrees, aluminum melts at 2,000 degrees. So after it comes out of the fire, it's red hot, and then they take a fire hose and they spray it with the fire hose, and the door has to remain closed and latched. And this is what it looks like. This is as it's coming out of the fire, and it's red hot right now. And that's what the door has to go through. And it's a critical that it has to stay closed and latched or you fail those tests. It's a very difficult test, but it saves lives and it's critical. One thing to know is that door manufacturers locate their hinge preps in different locations. Shown here are two 84-inch doors. The one on the left is a Seco door and the one on the right is a Curry's door. As you can see, the dimensions for the hinge locations vary based on who manufactures the hinge. So the question is, can you install a Seco door in a Curry's frame? Keep in mind, both Seco and Curry's can make other people's door preps. So Curry's can make a door to fit into a Seco frame, or a Seco can make a door to fit into a Curry's frame. Just need to specify which one you want. But keep in mind, they each have their own. So if you're going strictly with Curry's door, it's going to have Curry's door preps. And if you ever install someone else's door, say a Seco door into a Curry's frame, you have to order it with the Curry's preps. There are many features available with hinges, such as NPR, which is a non-removable pin. This is driven into the barrel, and this is inaccessible when the door is in the closed position. This is highly recommended for all out-swinging doors. This prevents someone from trying to knock the pin out of the hinge. And this is called an NPR, always recommended for exterior openings. What we're showing you here is called a prison safety feature. This offers a 7/16 diameter stud projecting from the back of each leaf, and when slipped into holes in the hinge prep and the door prep, it locks the hinge in there so the hinge cannot be removed. Even if the screws were broken off, the hinge could not be removed. And that's the prison safety feature. Another option you have is the safety stud. This stud is attached to the face of one of the leaves and engages a cavity on the opposite leaf when the door is closed. This causes the hinges to interlock each other. So once again, even if you were able to remove the pin, you still could not separate the two halves because they're engaging each other. So this is a nice additional security feature. Another option you have is what we call a hospital tip. A hospital tip is a one-piece non-removable pin that tapers the tip at the end. This is to prevent the pin from being removed. Also prevents the collecting of dust, and it also is behavioral health feature where you couldn't get a rope to hang on it because the rope would slide right off. So when it comes to hinges, there are different types. The first type, we talked about this previously before we got into more details, is a full mortise hinge. This is the most common type. As we mentioned, it's mortised into the door's edge and into the frame's edge. Next, we're going to look at a few different types. This type is what we call a full surface hinges. These are often used on fire-rated doors to repair them. These would be used on wood doors that don't have reinforcements for fire applications. This is oftentimes used in those applications there. Another popular application is on steel gates, where it's hung on an iron frame. So this does have a few different applications, but this is a full surface, so it's mounted to the surface of the frame and to the surface of the door, making the entire hinge very visible, so it's not a good looking thing. This should be used in repair applications more than any other application. Next is what we call a half surface. And one thing you want to remember with the terms half surface, we're always referring to the door. So when we say half surface, that means it's going to be applied to the surface of the door. Okay, half surface hinges are often used with fire labeled wood doors with insufficient hinge reinforcements. Once again, in these cases, the door leaf is attached with grommet nuts and bolts. And these hinges, one is mortised into the frame and the other one is attached to the surface of the door. Because it's a half surface, it's always referring to the door, so it's applied to the surface of the door. And here's a different look at it, just because sometimes they can be hard to visualize, but that's what it would look like when the door was closed. It's half surface and it's applied to the surface of the door. The next one we're looking at is a half mortise. Once again, we're always referring to the door, so it's half mortise, so it's going to be mortised into the door at this point. Okay, this oftentimes is used on both hollow metal doors and wood doors also. And just to give you another look at this one here, because it's half mortised, it's mortised into the door here, but surface applied to the frame. Okay, so this is a half mortise hinge. And once again, this is usually used as a repair application or a retrofit application. A couple other hinges you should be aware of is called a raised barrel hinge. So if your door is not, say if you don't have a flush mounted door, but rather that the door sits back. So right here we're showing you this would be a flush mounted door. But if the door sat back in the opening, so that surface there was extended out to here, you would have a problem attaching this hinge there because you see that the barrel of the hinge would interfere with the frame itself. So they do make a special type of hinge for this so the barrel won't interfere with the wall. Okay? So what they call this type of hinge, it's called a raised barrel hinge. Okay, so with a raised barrel hinge, it pushes the barrel over. So for a full mortise raised barrel hinge, it provides the offsets for the hinge barrel, and this eliminates issues with it hitting the jamb and such. Keep in mind, with a raised barrel hinge, you should always have a beveled door on it. It should always be used with a beveled edge door, because don't forget it's pushing the whole door over, so you need the bevel so the door will close. If you use a square bevel door on this, the door probably won't close because the whole door is pushed over. The next type of hinge we're looking at is called a swing clear hinge. A common issue when creating a barrier-free opening is the door opening at 90 degrees, and is the door still within the frame's opening, creating a barrier in the opening. Swing clear hinges resolve this issue with an offset barrel. The hinge, an offset barrel of the hinge, and relocates it on the face of the frame, thereby removing the door completely from the opening when the door is open to 90 degrees. This hinge meets or exceeds ANSI A117.1, providing accessibility and usability for the physically handicapped. Okay, here's another look at a swing clear hinge. And this door is on swing clear hinges, and the door swings completely out of the opening. You notice here is the hinge itself, and where the barrel is mounted, the door is completely out of the opening, so it's not interfering with the stops at all. These are called swing clear hinges. These are very, very frequently used in hospitals, and especially when you want to make the door just a little bit wider. And there's a view from the opposite side. You see how the whole barrel is slid over. Once again, that's called a swing clear hinge. Okay. Another interesting type of hinge is called a wide throw hinge. This is for doors with deeper reveal. In applications when the door is in a deep reveal, when the offset between the door's face and the frame, the situation limits the amount how much the door can open. This causes a problem with the hardware. Okay, so here's a quick look. So when you have an application like this here, and you have these railings on the wall, these railings can cause a problem because sometimes the door is not allowed to open up all the ways. And in applications like this, because of these railings here, they will use swing clear hinges. And this will pull the door out of the opening so the door can still lay flat at 90 degrees. So this is to handle the railing types. So when you have a railing across the wall, it allows the door to come out, so the door will sit flat with the door. You want it to rest parallel with the wall, basically. Okay, and another type of unusual hinge, which you very rarely see, is called an anchor hinge. Most oftenly used in high frequency on heavy wood or metal doors because of the additional anchor. As you can see, it's attached to the top of the frame and it's attached to the top of the door. Okay, anchor hinges are sold in sets, which includes a full mortise anchor hinge and two standard heavy and 2 heavyweight hinges, full Mortise hinges. Okay, these hinges are handed, and they do take special door prep and special frame prep, and that needs to be considered when you're specifying this job. The next type of hinge is called a spring hinge. Okay, a spring hinge automatically closes the doors, and spring hinges are adjustable, so you can adjust the amount of pressure that it closes the door with. Spring hinges can be used on fire-rated doors if they have the UL label on them. But keep in mind, with spring hinges, you always have to have 2 spring hinges on a fire-rated door. And keep in mind, in this industry, we really don't like spring hinges. The problem with spring hinges is all it does is slam the door. It does not control the door's motion. All it does is close the door. Keep in mind, with these type of hinges, you can get these electrified, so you can have wires running through them, so you can run the wires from the frame to the door. And one of the latest things is, in the past, this was always done with wire nuts. So you would attach the wires, and then you would shove all these little wire nuts back inside of the door. Back in 2006, Assa Abloy developed the Electrolink system, which is a simple plug-and-play system where it just plugs in together, simplifying the whole process. Another new type of hinge I want to mention to you are concealed hinges. Concealed hinges are for wood or hollow metal doors, and they are non-handed. They will allow the door to open to 180 degrees, and these things are available as a stainless steel base metal or as a zinc base metal. You can get these in a satin chrome finish or as a matte black finish. There are other finishes available. These things are quite impressive with the amount of weights they can carry. As you can see here, for a 36-inch door, this will handle weights up to 275 pounds with 4 hinges, which is quite impressive. One of the latest hinges they developed was the stainless steel hinge. This one is, the base metal is stainless steel, and it is non-handed. You have 3 degrees of adjustability with these hinges, so you can adjust them in, out, up, and down, and left and right. So you have 3 degrees of adjustability. And one really nice thing is that these stainless steel hinges are UL listed for both hollow metal and steel covered composite doors for up to 3 hours. And they are UL listed on wood core doors for up to 20 minutes. So now you have completely concealed hinges available for fire-rated openings that can handle substantial door weights. Here is how you adjust it. So right in here is by adjusting these screws with an Allen wrench, you can adjust the motion of this up and down, left and right, and side to side, which is really nice. Okay, we're done with butt hinges, so now we're going to touch on continuous hinges. The weight of the door with standard hinges is always in tension. It's always trying to pull the door out of the opening, because the door is always trying to follow the opening, because all the weight of the door is in this direction here. So this becomes to cause doors to separate. This is what causes doors to wear out, okay?
Most commonly, hinge failure begins when doors are opened past stop device limits. The resulting kickback shock to the hinges can surpass 1,000 pounds of force. Subsequent racking eventually loosens screws, distorts hinge leaves, pulls open knuckles, damages bearings, or creates other serious damage to your standard butt hinge, as well as the door frame your assembly hangs within.
And when you have problems like that, after years of use and abuse, oftentimes they can either be used in new applications or in retrofit applications. Here we're showing you a continuous hinge. The nice thing about it is spreads the stress out the entire height of the frame and the door. Okay, unlike standard hinges where most of the weight is, unlike standard hinges where more of the weight is on a single hinge at the very top of the door, a continuous hinge spreads the weight out the entire height of the opening, spreading out the entire stress, reducing wear and tear on the opening. There are basically 2 types of continuous hinges. There's continuous geared hinges, and there's pin and barrel hinges. Both of them have their advantages. Couple of the advantages is security enhancements by preventing anything from being inserted between the door and the frame, making it a perfect product to reduce vandalism. In addition, continuous hinges aid in the stop of air infiltration by creating a complete seal from top to bottom on the hinge side of the door. Okay, a few things you need to know about continuous hinges. First, there is no vertical adjustment, which means you can't adjust them up and down. So once you've installed them, that's where they are. So you need to make sure that they're installed correctly because there is no vertical adjustment. The weight of the door is still on the frame, but the screws are in tension opposed to shear. Okay, and in new construction, if a full mortise continuous hinge is being used, the door must be ordered accordingly. Continuous and butt hinges require different clearances between the door and the frame and must be considered. Okay, as we mentioned, no vertical adjustment, special door prep, and you have different ways of mounting it also. So continuous pin and barrel hinges, as we're showing you here, is similar to what you find on a standard butt hinge, but runs the full length of the door. The hinges are available in different base metals, usually stainless steel, plain steel, and aluminum. Concealed Teflon coated stainless steel pins with self-lubricating nylon bearings are at each knuckle to ensure a long life. Okay, so at each knuckle you have bearings there. These knuckles are 12-gauge stainless steel and feature a split nylon bearing surface at each knuckle for smooth operation. They can handle doors up to 900 pounds, 4 feet wide. The standard finish for the stainless steel hinge is going to be a satin stainless steel, but you can get a bright finish if you'd like, or you can get a scratch-resistant powder-coated finishes also. These hinges are non-handed. And here's a look at one of these hinges in a new applications. So this is a pin and barrel hinge, and it appears to be a basement application where the doors are being opened up automatically. These doors probably get a lot of beating, and that's why they're using continuous hinges. Just like commercial hinges, continuous hinges are available in different types. The most common types are edge mount. So here we're showing you an edge mount continuous hinge. So it's mounted to the edge of the door and to the edge of the frame. All the mounting hardware is concealed when the door is closed. A full surface flush continuous hinges are surface mounted to the face of the door and to the face of the frame. These hinges are most often used to repair fire labeled doors or non-labeled doors where you have very tight clearances. This application does not require special door preps because doesn't require any special door preps or any special preps in the door itself.
A Markar continuous hinge will spread the stress along the full length of the door and frame, distributing shock forces evenly, so wear and tear to the frame and door is reduced significantly. Durability and security are enhanced, and the door maintains alignment to ensure the proper functioning of closers, panic devices, electrical transfers, and monitoring switches. The operation of the lock side of the door is positively affected by the alignment of the hinge side.
So the continuous hinge solved that problem they were having with that door. These hinges are also available as half surface continuous hinges. Keep in mind when we say half surface, we say surface, it means it's applied to the surface of the door. So it's mortised into the frame and it's surface applied to the door here. Swing clear hinges are also available to make sure that door can swing completely out of the opening, as we showed you before with the butt hinges, but these continuous hinges are also available as swing clear hinges. And they are also available as electrified hinges also. When you buy the electrified hinges, you're going to receive it as 3 pieces. You're going to have a top unit, a center unit where the wires are, and then a bottom unit. This way, if you ever have to do any repair work or any wiring on it, you can just remove the small segment instead of removing the full hinge. Additional options worth considering are medical bearings. These are specially designed for hospitals and other high-frequency openings. These hinges contain a polymer fiber reinforced polymer bearing that are self-lubricating and highly resistant to wear. These hinges can handle doors up to 600 pounds and are anti-BHMA grade 1, and they carry a 25-year warranty. So this is the medical bearings. Keep in mind, you can get these continuous hinges with basically a door position switch built into it. The first one we're looking at is an AMS. So this is an adjustable concealed switch. This is not available with aluminum or powder-coated hinges, but because it uses a magnet to tell when the door is open or closed. So if you're dealing with an aluminum or a powder-coated finish, then we also have the ES switch, which is not a concealed, it's an exposed switch, but it actually has a true micro switch, so when the door is closed, it closes the contact. The second type of continuous hinge we're going to look at is a gear type hinge. So this is a gear type hinge. Gear type hinges are two full height paired geared hinges manufactured out of extruded 663 T6 aluminum alloy, and then they're tempered. The pinless assembly distributes the stress load uniformly over the entire length of the opening of the door and frame. Okay. The frame and the door leaves are independently machined and then anodized to reduce wear. This allows the machined aluminum surfaces in direct contact as bearing surface to be really hard and smooth because the anodizing is done after it's machined. The continuous hinges act as a reinforcement for both the door and the frame because it does run the full length. Here's another new application where the continuous hinge, and this is a continuous geared hinge, runs the full length of the opening. So that's in a medical room. Even though continuous geared hinges are made out of aluminum, they are available fire rated. You will need to use a special fire pins for the fire rated assemblies, which add additional securities. These fire pins are threaded into the frame, and you have clearance holes in the door to accept the pins. So even though the hinge, because it's made out of aluminum, will melt off during a fire test, the pins are still going to keep the door in the opening and keep the door secure. As you can see that they're located in multiple locations on the edge of the door. So here we're showing you a full surface continuous geared hinge for a fire rated opening because it's using the fire stop pins. Full mortise continuous geared hinges are mounted on the edge of the door and the frame rabbets, concealing all the mounting hardware. These full mortise units are designed mainly for new door applications since the additional clearance is needed between the door and the frame compared to standard clearances. So on a standard clearance on a door opening, you would have 1/8 of an inch all the ways around with a standard commercial butt hinge. But because this is made out of aluminum, the material must be much thicker. So this requires on the hinge side a 5/16 of a gap opening. Okay. Another unique hinge that I really liked with this continuous geared hinge is this safety hinge. I thought this was a great idea. This eliminates the gap between the door and the frame as the door closes, which is a major pinch point. A full mortise hinge are designed mainly for new applications with childcare or nursing facilities. Keep in mind you need a very large gap on the hinge side of the door of 13/16 because even if a child has the finger on the edge of the door, it's not going to get crushed because of the large gap. I thought this was a great idea. Keep in mind these hinges are available as half surface, so they're surface applied to the door, mortised into the edge of the door. Okay. You can also get these as a full surface. And when you have them as a full surface hinge, these can be used as nice retrofit applications with a door where you remove the commercial butt hinges because it requires an 1/8 inch gap all the way around like a standard opening would. So this way you can use the existing door, but you can save the application, save the opening. These hinges are also available electrified. So once again, if you get these hinges, they will be coming to you in 3 different sections. And as you can see here, this can handle 4 amps at 24 volts. And it can also handle a 16 amp inrush for 300 milliseconds. And these are available with 4 wires, 8 wires, 12, or 16 wires. The last one we're going to take a quick look at are pivots. Pivots are made for very large doors and very heavy doors. Okay. Pivot sets are those such as those manufactured by Rixson are designed for very unusually heavy or very large doors. Here we're showing you a center hung pivot with the door here. With pivots, all the weight of the door is supported by the bottom pivot, eliminating the stress that occurs from other hanging methods on the frame, because all the weight's on the door, so there's no stress on the frame, which is really nice. With pivot sets, the door and the frame must be prepped specifically to accept the pivots. Pivots lack the versatility of standard or continuous hinges. Pivots are available as 2 different types, as an offset or a center hung hinge. Okay. What we're showing you here is these are offset pivots. Here's the top pivot, then you have the side jam pivot or the intermediate pivot, and then you have the bottom pivot, and these are all offset pivots. Here's a look at the 2 different types, the offset pivot and the center hung pivot. Each takes a special door prep and the frame preparation. Okay, the pivots are designed to withstand very large and very heavy doors. So these are the center hung pivots. Here we're showing you an application where on a bathroom they're using center hung pivots, so this way the door can swing in both directions. Here they're showing that you have a beveled edge on that side, or a bullnose edge on that side of the door. And because this is a bathroom, a single stall bathroom, they want to be able to open up the door in both directions in case somebody passes out in the bathroom, injures themselves, and they fall against the bathroom here. In this special application, there's a special strike involved here that allows the door to be swung open because it is on center hung pivots. Okay. So they can be double acting like you see here, which is very nice to have. They're not self-closing and they're not self-sealing. The door is not sealed. They cannot be used on fire-rated doors. Okay. You need to consider the sight line between these 2, and you do need a door stop if you're only going to have them swing in one direction. So if you're asking yourself, how does an offset pivot work? Take a moment and examine the line drawing as it moves. Note the pivot point is located 3/4 of an inch from the surface of the door. This pivot remains constant for all the pivots. The pivot points are located in the front of the door, so the pivot is visible. The position is 3/4 of an inch, and you can have this extended for up to 1.5 inches. Offset pivots are normally used with single acting rabbets because the door is only allowed to swing in one direction, but the door is allowed to swing 180 degrees. And with offset pivots, they are available with fire ratings, unlike center hung pivots are not. So 3/4 of an inch offset here. Okay, the pivot is visible and it will allow the door to swing 180 degrees, and it is available fire rated. When you have here, we're showing you a 1 3/4 inch offset opposed to the 1 inch offset. This is normally used if you're going to have cladding on the outside of the door. So if you're going to be adding something on the outside of the door, which is going to add to the thickness of it, that's about the only time you would use this 1.5 inch offset. You're not going to use this 1.5 inch offset for really thick doors, only if you have a facade on the front of the door, because this way it will leave the mounting screws going into the door itself, not into the facade. Okay. Here's a look at offset pivots. So these doors are hung on offset pivots, as you can see there. There's an intermediate pivot, a top pivot, and a bottom pivot. As you can see in all 3 of these videos, all of these are taking place in one hospital. So there are different applications for different hang methods within the same building here. Okay. So here we're just showing you how the door is closing here. And here what they're doing is they're showing you how a door coordinator controls. So it's holding the bigger door open until the smaller door closes. Then it allows the smaller door to close. Okay. Pivot sets provide the best possible means for hanging the door. The weight of the door is supported by the bottom pivot, which is on the floor. Pivots use the principle of gravity to its advantage. The door swings with less resistance on the frame. And the fasteners are usually in shear post tension, and this eliminates door sag. And it does allow for vertical adjustments. So pivots, you do have some vertical adjustments. Offset pivots provide better weight distribution and can handle taller doors than center hung pivots. Keep in mind, there's all different types of intermediate pivots. Here we're showing you a full Mortise intermediate pivot, and then you have half surface, half Mortise. So the intermediate pivots are available. The intermediate pivots always have to be ordered separately. Okay, center hung pivots are used more or less for aesthetic reasons. The pivot is mounted at the center of the door. Since center hung pivots are mounted at the center of the door, it's not visible for one thing, and the door can swing in both directions. So you need to have a radiused edges on these doors. Center hung pivots cannot be used on fire rated openings because it leaves too big of a gap on the edge of the door. And keep in mind, commercial center hung pivots are not spring loaded, so they automatically do not close. Here's a look at the top pivot, because I always thought that was interesting how they put the top pivot in. Basically, there's a screw located.
Install the jam portion of the top pivot into the header.
You attach the top pivot here.
Using adjusting screws, lower the pivot pin. Slide the aligning tool with the Install the jam portion of the top pivot into the header.
I'm not sure what happened there.
Using adjusting screws, lower the pivot pin. Slide the aligning tool with the
Okay, and that's how you attach the top doors, by adjusting this pin up and down. Okay, so center hung pivots are used on cased open frames, and depending on the pivot location within the door, it will limit how far the door can open, so keep that in mind. And center hung pivots are not recommended for doors over 8.5 feet tall. One really nice advantage that you have with pivots that you don't have with continuous hinges or butt hinges is that you can hang glass doors, or you can hang glass doors. These are made for glass doors. The glass is slid between the two pieces of metal, and therefore it can hold doors up to 175 pounds, 3 feet by 8 feet. Okay. Keep in mind, you can have pivots also wired. If you're using offset pivots, then the wire is going to come through the intermediate pivot that's at the center of the door. And if you're using center hung pivots, the top pivot is what allows the wire to come in. That's where the wires travel through. And that brings us to the end of our presentation on different methods of hanging a door. We're going to see if we have any questions now. So we're going to stop sharing and see if there are any questions. At this point, there are no questions. We'll hold it open for a second in case any questions occur. But if there are no questions, I really appreciate everyone taking their time out today for this webinar. Hopefully you found it enjoyable and educational. And please come back for more webinars. Keep in mind, Assa Abloy Academy is offering multiple webinars daily, all at no cost to you. Please join us for more webinars. And have a great day, everyone. Thank you very much.